Hey, Steve here. Thank you so much for joining me for Monday Guitar Motivation. We're just going to take a few seconds here because everybody's still piling in here. So thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and say hello. Let me know where you are from. Now, you might be joining me from YouTube. You might be joining me from Facebook or Twitter or wherever. Mike, how you doing, Mike? Mike is from Wales. Good to see you. T. Stephen Bell is here. How you doing? Thank you so much for being here. Kendall is here from Chile. Very cool. All right, so anyway, what we're going to be doing while people come in here is we're going to be talking today about preparing for playing with a band, going on tour, performing, prepping for some sort of musical situation that you might be in. All right, wow, we got all kinds of people here now. Tom from Norway, France, Ariel from Montreal. Columbia, South Carolina. Marty is here. Very cool. Johnny Richard is here. Zoha is here from Ontario. Brad is here. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. This is great. Hopefully you had a good weekend. And here we are. I'm in North Dakota, and it's getting very cold. It's a possibility we will have snow by the end of the week, so that's kind of sad. But that's the way it goes. Johnny is here. How you doing? Johnny Baines is here. Very nice to see you, bud. Let's see here. I'm North Dakota, now living in South Mississippi. Well, the weather's probably much better there. Last Jedi is here from Sacramento. Melanie is here from Germany. How you doing, Melanie? Guitar Rookie is here. Bob Powers is here from Atlantic City. Robert Gonzalez from Denver. How you doing, bud? Kendall Smith is here. Guitar Man is here from North Carolina. Rolando is here. Tons of people already here. So thank you, everybody, so much for being here. So we're not going to be playing today. I just want to talk to you a little bit and get your insight as well as we talk about this. So if you're on YouTube, go ahead and throw some comments in there to help somebody out, or Facebook, whatever page you might be on, that sort of thing. Kevin is here. Rick is here. Jason is here. Rockin' Reviews and Equipment is here. How you doing? James Summers is here. Just trying to get everybody as best I can here. Paul is here. How you doing? Leah's here. Leah's always here. Thank you for being here, Leah. That's awesome. So anyway, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking a little bit about preparing for playing with a band, and then we're going to talk a little bit about touring, and then we're going to talk about other musical endeavors that you might wind up with. And I'm just kind of going from some personal experience here from the vast amount of different things that I've done, from, playing in rock bands to touring to, many of you know just recently I'm going to be performing with, doing this musical locally here, Rock of Ages, that I'm doing with a local high school. And it's been a really great experience for me, simply because it's different than what I normally do. I've had some really great experiences doing different kinds of things, but this one has been a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and just the changes that happen so quickly with this thing. So I thought that'd be a great thing for us to talk about a little bit today, is how to prepare for these sorts of things. Felipe is here. Very cool. Nikki is here. Dave Bates is here. Tim Norris is here. Thank you so much, everybody. So Richard from the Netherlands is here. Very cool. So anyway, let's start off by just talking about the band situation. Let's say you're going to be joining a band, or you're putting together a band. Now, the first thing I'll say, and I might say it again later, but one of the most important things about being with other people, a band, a tour, whatever it might be, is personalities. Okay, very important to think about your contribution to that topic, personalities. Sometimes people are just so different that they don't really get along. Sometimes people are just so different that they may not get along, but they don't not get along. They just don't really connect. I've actually been blessed for really the most part to always have been in bands where maybe I don't know everybody going in, but by the time it's done, we tend to be very close, very, very good friends afterwards. And it doesn't happen every time, but it does happen a lot. And I could give you all sorts of wonderful people out there that I've played with or toured with that I think are just amazing, and I still keep in touch with them to this day. But it doesn't always happen that way. And so the most important thing is you need to be thinking about your personality and what you're contributing to this situation. And so let's start off by saying this. I've always been a bit, believe it or not, of an overachiever. Okay, so I tend to want to go into musical situations being as prepared as I possibly can, but then also being okay with the flexibility of things needing to change, right? So I'll learn the stuff as best I can, but also be ready for things to have to be readjusted as needed. Okay, so that's important. I try and be prompt. I show up early, and I show up prepared, and I show up ready to stay organized, be organized, and help out as needed. I try not to waste a lot of time, and I try to play with people that don't waste a lot of my time, because that's the easiest way for us to get stuff done. It's not that we can't have fun, but if somebody shows up an hour late all the time, or somebody's always calling and saying they can't show up, is this really going to work, right? And I certainly don't want to be that person. So, if rehearsal's at 7, I'm going to be there at 6:30, or, and I might have to drive from out of town. Sometimes I drive for rehearsals. I have rehearsals in Minneapolis, which is almost 4 hours from where I live. I'll still show up early, obviously, and be prepared when I get there. At least, that's the hope, is that I'll be as prepared as possible. So that's something to think about a little bit, is always being as prepared as you possibly can. And I pride myself on playing with other players that do the same thing. So I really have had very few experiences, but I hear a lot of horror stories of people that get in a band and, somebody doesn't show up, or somebody always shows up. Like, here's something to think about for rehearsals, and then we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but the rehearsal is there for everybody in the band to cohesively start putting the music together. You're not at band practice to learn the song. Your bass player or your drummer or your singer or your keyboard player or your saxophonist or whoever is not at band practice to start learning the songs, because then you're wasting everybody else's time, right? Because now everybody's waiting for you or somebody else to learn the material before you can actually start playing together. So the goal is to show up for those rehearsals being as prepared as you can be. Now, as you can be, that's what we want to talk about. Now, I have some notes over here that I just wrote this morning to kind of think about. So let's talk about just a traditional band setting. Let's say you're going to be in a 3-piece band. So there's a guitar player, and there's a bass player, and there's a drummer, or whatever the situation might be. But there's a 3-piece situation. And you're going to be playing songs by other people, cover songs, right? That's what you're doing. We'll start with that. Now, oftentimes, you're going to be learning songs that have 4 parts or 5 parts, or maybe more than that, right? But these are songs that you've chose that you want to try and put together. Now, as you start learning these songs, what you're going to start realizing as a smaller band, as a 3-piece band, is that the arrangements oftentimes are going to need to be different than the traditional sense, because there's not enough players. So you might be, as a guitar player, which is what I'm primarily speaking to probably, you might be playing some keyboard parts on your guitar, or you might need to leave that little solo fill out because the chords that are needed underneath that are more important than that little fill that you really wish that you could play because you like it so much, but it's going to take away from the thickness of what's happening with that song, right? So that's something that's very important to think about, is the arrangement and how important it is to try and cover that arrangement. Now, in many of the bands that I've played in, it isn't really let's learn the song note for note, because oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes you might need to make some sacrifices here and there to try and fill that song out to make it sound as best you can. And I've played in a number of 3-piece bands, and one of them I played with for a very, very long time. And so we just learned how to roll with the punches with songs and play, and then as we'd rehearse, we'd kind of reorganize that arrangement. Now, when I say arrangement, I'm not talking we move the chorus over here or something. I'm talking how we approached playing a Peter Gabriel song, right, that has keyboards and whatever, but we're not using keyboards, for instance. So how do we rearrange that to make it sound as full as we can for the audience to enjoy it, yet it doesn't sound like anything's missing, but yet as musicians still may be sacrificing certain elements of that song for the betterment of the arrangement. So think about that a little bit. Now, you might be a 4-piece band with a singer, or maybe a keyboard player, or maybe 2 guitar players, or even a 5-piece band, whatever it might be, okay? And once you start getting there, again, you've got a little more flexibility because now people can cover different parts. So you might want to have a conversation. As guitar players, you might want to have a conversation. And, if you're playing with somebody that you're comfortable with as another guitar player, you might say, hey, why don't you always take the high harmonies? Anytime we come across harmonies, you take the high harmonies, I'll take the low harmonies, or whatever it might be, right? And so this way you've got it kind of organized, and it's easier than, high harmony on this one, low harmony on this one, whatever on this one. You just kind of organize those things. But you need to talk about it, obviously, and figure those things out. So you think about harmonies. You think about how you're going to break up those solos. For instance, I play with a Judas Priest tribute band, and we don't break up the solos relative to KK Downing and Glenn Tipton. We break up the solos relative to what's more comfortable for the other guitar player, or what's more comfortable for me, or what just makes sense in terms of balance. So we're both, enjoying the situation we're in. We're both enjoying the song. Everybody gets to play. We're trying to stay as equal as possible and that sort of thing. So it's really not about trying to break it up in terms of, this player always plays this, and so that's my role in the band. It's more being kind of equals in it and making sure that we're both happy with everything that's going on in there. Okay? So that's something to think about a little bit too. Another really big thing to think about if you're playing with a couple of different guitar players is things like chord voicings or lines, different melody lines or something like that. You don't always have to be playing the exact same chord voicings. Maybe if somebody's playing, maybe you're playing an acoustic band or you're playing at church or something, and somebody's playing those open chords, maybe you're looking for a different voicing, even though it's not in the original, but you're adding those things in, again, to add a little bit of a layer, not just from a guitar ego perspective, but it makes it sound a little bit more full. Right? So I do that all the time is if I know I'm going to be playing with another player that is probably going to be approaching it from a certain perspective, I might try and play something else. And here's the other thing. I might actually not play at all. Like there might be times when it doesn't require two guitar players, so I'm going to hold off. Now, obviously, which I do play in church sometimes. So obviously playing in church is very different than playing in the Judas Priest band or something like that. But if I'm in church, I know that those arrangements are going to be very different, and it doesn't always require me to play. I don't always need to be doing something, or if I am, maybe I'm doing something that's just adding, like Jeff Jarvis said, it might sound fuller, or it's a layering thing. If I'm playing, we're doing a song and it's building in energy. Maybe what it needs for me to do in the beginning is just stay out. And then when I start playing, it's going to add that energy right at that spot. And then I can use some more volume or change my preset or something to add a little more gain or whatever it might be. And then, it'll keep adding to that energy. So putting your ego in check sometimes to know that you don't need to play all the time. You don't need to have every solo. It depends on your situation. If you're the only guitar player, then you're going to be covering all those things, and you want to be thinking about the arrangement. So that's something else I think about all the time. The other really big thing when you're playing with, in a band setting are things like who's starting the song. Like I'm sure most of you probably have experienced this before. You can learn a song, your band decides on these songs that you're going to play and you learn how to play these. But sometimes the song that you're learning, you listen to it and it just starts. So when you're playing, does your drummer count it in? And does your drummer count in with 4 all the time? Sometimes maybe counting in with a 4 on a hi-hat or 4 with the sticks or something might seem long. So you might be playing in a band where your drummer tends to count in on 2. And that's what your drummers get used to is just tss, tss, and you go. Getting used to that is very important. Maybe it's something that you start. And this is the next thing, is if you start the song, you want to be very aware of the tempos, okay, that you're playing at, because you don't want to start the songs, especially if you're on stage. A lot of times the energy will hit you and you might just kick into a tune way too fast. And, like I used to play in a metal band where we played, a bunch of Slayer and different things like that. And if you start too fast and the song is already fast, you're just blasted, and then everybody's trying to keep up. So sometimes you need to be aware of that. Sometimes the energy is great, but sometimes you need to be in check of that tempo, that energy that you might have. So being aware of the tempo, you might sing the chorus in your head or one of the hooks right before you start. If you're the one that's starting the song, you might just sing that in your head to get it in your head. And then you start tapping your foot a little bit and then you start playing. That's a really great way of being able to do that. And then, of course, one of the worst things is ending the song. Like so often we'll learn the song, but the song that we learned has a fade out or something like that, and we're not ready. We don't know how to end it. So again, we need to develop an arrangement. How do we want to end this? Do we want to end it, on a punch and everybody stops? Or what we've always referred to as like a wash, where your drummer's playing a bunch of stuff and you're doing this. You might do a wash that comes out, or but these are things you need to work on. So as a band, you're thinking about these things. You're thinking about the arrangement and what you need to be playing, when you need to be playing, how many people are in your band, how thick it needs to be at different points in time in the song. Nervous musicians tend to play too fast, Steven says. And not always just nervousness. I mean, you might just feel that energy. Sometimes when you're on stage, you'll just feel this energy, and that energy will take you away, and you'll start playing fast because you feel that, which is a really great feeling, but it can get a little crazy sometimes. So those are things to think about. Starting the song, how to stop the song, tempos, whether you're starting it, whether somebody else is starting it. You might have heard me talk about this, and you can find videos on YouTube where I talk about this too, but as a musician, when you learn songs, and you might relate to this, you might be learning a song and you'll get to a part in that song that causes tension in you. Like maybe a technical thing, right? Where you're playing and the song is dialed in, but there's a part at measure 38 or whatever it is that like it's a stop sign that's coming. You know that when that's coming, you can feel the tension happening in your body, right? And if there's gonna be a problem in the song, it's gonna be there. Or as a band, when you rehearse, there's a fill or a break or something that happens in there that is a problem spot. I always call these red flag spots, right? It's a red flag, you tip it and you know that thing is coming and it's been a problem in the past. So those red flag spots are things that you really want to try and dial in, either as an individual or as a band, to figure out what you need to do with that. Either you need to rehearse it more, or you need to find, again, maybe it's an edit in the arrangement of that needs to be done to make that part less of a stress point for you or for your band or whatever it might be, you see? And this even leads into things like guitar players doing solos. Like you might have a solo coming up, and that solo, I always use this as an example. You've just been hired by whatever band to go out on the road, and you have 10 days to prepare. And you learn all the songs, but there's a solo in there that you just struggle with, right? So what are you going to do with that solo? Well, you're going to learn the solo note for note. You're going to learn the solo for the most part and add some of your stuff. You're going to make it more of your own to make it more comfortable. You can't rush technique. Like if you're physically incapable of playing whatever this thing is today, you might not have that technically dialed in 10 days, right? It might take 6 months. It might take a year. I don't know. I'm just saying you need to be aware of that. And if it's something that's a make or break, like in 10 days, it will not be technically sound in 10 days, whatever that thing is. And I'm not saying that negatively. I'm saying it honestly. You have to deal with that. Either you're not going to do it or you are going to do it, but you're going to have to edit that somehow, right, to figure out what to do. And just be aware of that. So these are things to really be aware of when you're going into this situation playing with these players. Personality, arrangement, how many people are in the band, starting and stopping, parts of the song that, stress points or red flags, whatever you want to call those. Different kinds of things to think about, okay? Then you move on to the stage, right? So now you're going to be doing these rehearsals and you're going to get ready for stage. When you're playing on stage, you need to be thinking about, for instance, the gear, right? Do you have a backup guitar? Are you using in-ear monitors? Are you using stage monitors? Are you using a hotspot? Like, what kind of volume are you dealing with here? If you come from old school where you played like me, if you played in a metal band and you're used to having two 12s on stage, or two 412s, excuse me, and now all of a sudden you're doing in-ears and they want you to have your volume way back, well, that's going to adversely affect, for instance, maybe your feedback that you get from your guitar. Or another thing that I always think about is the distance that my amp is back relative to where I am. If it's a large stage and the amp is way back there, my feedback, because I use a lot of feedback in more of my hard rock bands, it's going to be different, isn't it? If the amp is way back versus, up front. Does your band want you to side wash, right? Where you push you turn your amp the other direction toward the side of the stage, or, maybe you turn it toward the drummer, right? If you're not loud enough, or you turn it away from your drummer if you're too loud, or you face this direction. These are all things that you really need to be thinking about. Jeff Jarvis says, do I use in-ear monitors? Sometimes. It depends on the band I'm in. If I'm in a band where I don't sing at all, I don't tend to use in-ear monitors, and I'm a very easy player to work with. Like, I'm not real finicky when it comes to monitors. All I usually ever have in my stage monitor is going to be the kick drum, which I don't need the low end of the kick drum. I just need the clickiness of the kick drum to line up to. And then oftentimes I'll be able to hear enough of the bass and whatever to monitor off of. And I've just gotten used to that over years to be able to hear it environmentally. If I can't, I might take a little bit of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any of that. And then I'd have vocals, and that would be it. If I was running in-ear monitors, if I'm singing, if I need to do harmonies and things like that, or for like this musical that I'm in right now where I need to be able to reference lines to cue certain things that are happening within the musical aspect of this situation, then I'll run in-ear monitors, but I almost always run one out and one in. And I know people say that that's bad, it can be bad for your hearing. I don't run my in-ear monitors very hot, just like I don't run my stage monitor very hot. They're just there for a little reference. So if I was running in-ear monitors, all I'd be running is one in, one out. It'd be the same thing. I just need to hear who's speaking, who's singing, whatever, and that's about it. I can reference, my guitar on stage. I don't need it running in my ears, and so I don't run a lot of anything in there. So, Jeff, I do run in-ears if I'm, A, either singing harmonies, or B, if it's something really big where I need to really hear things to keep everything organized and in time, if that makes sense. Okay, so stage volume, that's another really big thing. A couple things to really think about here. One thing that I think is really important is, what do you do when things go wrong? Like, a lot of times when you're rehearsing, when somebody screws up, you'll stop, and that's okay because you need to fix things. But there does come a point where you might want to just continue on and learn how to deal with the situation when things go wrong. Your singer gets off in time. You took the song too fast. Somebody missed a fill. Your drummer dropped a stick. I mean, you broke a string. Whatever it might, you dropped your guitar pick. Whatever these things are, these are real things. And I remember having a professor one time in college that said to me, I'm paraphrasing here, the true sign of musicianship is not when everything is going right, it's when everything goes wrong. And I think there's some real truth to that, because when you're on stage, the goal is to make sure that the audience doesn't recognize that something went wrong, at least as much as possible, right? Because you want it to keep going. You're human, they're human, your audience is human. Crap happens, right? You miss a note, don't get in your own head and lose it, right? You just keep going. You just keep going through your thing. But the trick is to keep going. Like, as a band, you don't want a train wreck so bad that you need to stop and start the song all over, because that's not good. Okay, so you find a way through. I remember a couple of times. I remember once playing. We were doing "Angel of Death" by a Slayer, which is just chaos, especially if the sound is really loud on stage and it's really loud out front. It's just a chaos of volume. And all of a sudden, the singer was off from us, right? So we're cruising, and all of a sudden the singer's kind of somewhere else. So I'm looking at the drummer, and we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do, right? Because he's playing and I'm playing, and we're trying to figure out where to go. And of course, this is where this comes in, is what do you do? Do you follow the arrangement of the song, or do you go to the singer? Well, in my opinion, if you can, you'll always go to the singer because that's the easiest way. The singer will keep going and you'll lock back in. You know, you might have a singer that's singing something and then all of a sudden goes, hey, how you doing? Blah, 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 or starts talking to somebody. And then I was thinking about it like a plane waiting to land. You just circle until the singer starts singing again, and then you're back in doing whatever. Or the singer's mic, stops working or something, and you'll keep going, and then the singer will come back in, but maybe the singer's in a different spot now. Or listen, stuff happens. So you try the best you can to make this work. So if you can go to the singer, go to the singer. But there are times when maybe the singer isn't the one that's giving the cues, right? I'm not the kind of person that's locked into a score. I'm listening to the musicians and I'm going to follow as best I can. But we need to have a plan, right? I mean, if something goes wrong, everybody's going to look at each other and ultimately they're going to look at somebody that's going to try and direct them somewhere. Now, if it's a train wreck and it needs to stop and start all over, then it needs to stop and start all over, and you laugh about it and you move on. But it's something that you work on again, right? So that doesn't happen. So you don't want that to continue happening. Otherwise, the perception of the quality of your band is going to go down. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And again, please continue on with your comments about these things because you might have a different experience. And so when somebody watches this on YouTube or Facebook after this is over, it would be great to have your comments on there as well of maybe some experience that you've had with things like that. Okay? So anyway, we've got all that now. Make sure that when you're going to go to that show that you've got the proper gear. Not only the amp that you're using, but maybe you've got a backup amp that you use or a backup rig of some kind. You've got batteries, you've got a flashlight, you've got extra strings, you've got string changing stuff. You might have I have a Fender bag that I keep all this extra stuff. I keep, extra guitar straps in there, cables, ground lift, DI, picks, strings, string change, mic cable, speaker cable, extension cord, power strip. I'm just trying to go through everything that I'm seeing in my bag at this moment in my head. But all of those things are in there. And I tend to bring a couple extra of a lot of things because if another person shows up and forgot their guitar strap or forgot a guitar cable or their guitar cable is shortening out, at least I have some of these things available. Now, it's a smaller bag. It doesn't have everything in there, but that's something that I will always bring to all my shows that has all of those things in there, okay? So in case I need extra batteries for my one of my guitars, which is another thing is I'm very aware, like I keep a list on my phone of when I change my guitar strings. I also keep a list on my phone when I change batteries in my guitars for my active pickups. So I always know when those things are. Now, batteries will last a really long time in a guitar, but I'm always aware of that just to keep track of things, okay? And I always have a backup guitar that I bring along because I use a lot of floating tremolo systems. So if I break a string, I'm gonna need another guitar to throw on, and keep going. So having these things ready is very important. Maybe you just have a little, modeling amp or something that you bring along just in case something breaks down. You've got this other thing. It's nice to have just something like that, even if it doesn't sound great, but it'll get you through the rest of the show until you can get it fixed, right? So I don't want to take all your time, but just another thing to be thinking about. A tour. So you've been hired to go on a tour, right? And you've accepted and you know the terms of whatever it is that you're doing with this tour, how many shows you've got, how long you're going to be on the road, blah, blah, blah. But here's some things that you want to make sure that you know. What gear do you need to bring? Is backline provided? Like for all these shows, are you sponsored by somebody where maybe backline is provided or there's a guitar rig that's already available so you don't need to bring your head in 412 or whatever it is that you do. Or maybe you're just bringing, your digital product or whatever it might be, whatever it is. But you want to make sure that you're okay with that because if you're using, especially if you're going from city to city and you're using different backlines, like a different amp, different nights, depending on where you're playing, sometimes it's really nice to have some sort of reliable pedal Like oftentimes I would bring my Strymon Riverside, which is a distortion pedal, because I can get lots of different wonderful sounds from that, and I can put it in front of almost any amp if needed, and it'll get me into a place that feels comfortable for me. Okay, so that's something that I would bring along if I was playing multiple different backlines. I would probably bring something like that. Nowadays, of course, you can bring a Kemper, or some sort of digital modeler or whatever it might be. You might just bring a pedal and that's all you're going to use. And that's fine too. Back in the day, of course, we didn't really have those, but something like that. Another thing to think about is any specifics that are that you need. Any food specifics that you need before you go out on tour. Any medical specifics that you need, different things like that. Get those things prepared before you ever leave. Keep yourself organized with anything that might be a tax write-off that you can utilize, from food, gear, hotels. If any of that stuff comes out of your pocket, you want to make sure you keep track of that stuff so you get reimbursed. Per diem, if you're getting paid for on show days and off show days, make sure that whatever that arrangement that you have gives you enough money to do whatever it is that you need to do. If you're getting $20 for the day, that might not feed you, right? So you're going to need a little more money than that, So you need to just make sure that you've already talked about those things. Yes, Malmsteen needs donuts for the tour, that's for sure. Anyway, so think about those things a little bit. Is there anything that is required of you on your off days versus show days, right? If you're on an off day, are you required to drive? Are you required are you required for rehearsals or something like that? You got to make sure that you think about those things, okay? Stage, getting on stage, is there a certain preference of side of stage, different kinds of things, stage right versus stage left. Does it make any difference? For me, none of that stuff really makes any difference. I'll go wherever it is you need me to go. Which brings up kind of two vanity things, but things to think about a little bit. Number one, your stage presence. Your stage presence, the way you dress, whatever it is that you're doing. And number two, which is even maybe sillier but very important, is being aware of what's comfortable in terms of your guitar strap height, right? Different guitars might require a different guitar strap height to be comfortable when you're playing, depending on what it is you're doing. And again, if you've been doing this a long time, you know all about this stuff. But if you haven't really done it before, it's stuff to think about a little bit. You don't want to go out on stage and be dressed very uncomfortably or look uncomfortable or not look natural. And of course, the more you do this, the better your stage presence becomes. But it's just something to think about a little bit because it is kind of important, Let's see here. So now moving on to the next thing is let's say you get hired for something. This is the last thing I got for you. Like for me, doing this musical theater situation that I find myself in right now, what I'm finding is that every time we show up for rehearsals, there are subtle things that are a little bit different. Maybe the blocking is different, or the timing of something is different, or the cue of who's going to be, starting or stopping something might be different. The tempo might have changed a little bit. Tempos are very, very important because, like with this thing that I'm doing now, there's a lot of stuff going on stage. There are 20 to 30 people dancing at a time to different things and moving stuff around. And so the tempos are crucial. If we take the tempo too slow, it might be very uncomfortable for them to dance to it. Or if we take the tempos too fast, it might be really hard for them to dance or sing to it. So having those tempos dialed in, having the timing or the blocking of these things dialed in is very important. And so this is the thing. Communication becomes very important because there are, I think I'm the only one that's going to be at all of these shows. The other musicians all have fill-ins. So it's important that we all stay in communication because last night's rehearsal had so-and-so there, and tonight's rehearsal has somebody else there that wasn't there last night for the changes that were made. So, it's important for me especially to make sure I have all of this stuff logged and written down. And then, again, like I said before, we meet beforehand to talk about all of these changes. So if there's a different bass player or a different drummer or something, they're aware of these changes that happened at the last rehearsal that they didn't know about, you see? So somebody's got to take charge of that stuff, and it's not just because I want to be in charge. Sometimes I don't want to be in charge. But But if you're the person that's always there, it might be your responsibility to really try and keep track of this stuff to help everybody else out. Because it really isn't about you and your ego of being in charge. It's more the fact you want everybody to look as good as you possibly can. You want those performers out there, you want them to be as comfortable as possible so they can do the best job that they can. And as a musician, you're able to do that. You're able to give them that by being organized and being prepared for everything that's happening. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing week. And take care, stay positive. And remember, if you're looking for anything guitar, always head over to guitarzoom.com and check out what we have to offer. So I'll talk to you all soon, all right? Take care.